In this video, we'll cover adding and processing a credit card or checking and savings account payment in ServiceCEO. Processing a payment through ServiceCEO begins by adding that payment to the system. Here we start on a customer's record. We'll scroll down and look at a list of open invoices for this customer. We'll begin by adding a credit card payment to this $240 invoice. We'll then add a checking or savings payment to the $660 invoice. And finally, we'll go and process both payments through our payment service provider. The process to make a payment hasn't changed much. We begin by clicking the Add Payment button here. As usual, ServiceCEO assumes you'll be paying the full balance of an invoice. However, if this needs to change, be sure to change the total payment as well as the amount fields down here. When you select the payment type, as this customer already has a default credit card attached to their account, the default credit card is already populated here. However, I can select a new card by clicking Change, or I can add in a new card. Please be sure to watch the video on adding credit card accounts and checking savings accounts if you don't know how to do this. We'll keep it on this card and click Save. This has now added a credit card payment for $240 to our system. Let's come back to this customer and pay off the other invoice. For this example, we want to switch to a checking or savings account. Again, we already have checking and savings accounts loaded in for this customer, so we'll go ahead and select one that's already on the account. Then click Save. Once you've added a payment to ServiceCEO, you now have to go to the Accounting tab to process the payment. On the Accounting tab, with the payment processing release, ServiceCEO has added an Unprocessed tab as well as a Transaction Log tab. The transaction log contains all payments that you have processed through ServiceCEO. This tab allows you to create custom views on things such as the business unit, the type of transaction, the type of account, the status of the transaction, as well as the transaction date. From this list, you'll see the type of the transaction number, the customer, the payment method, amount, transaction date, as well as the status of the transaction. When you add a payment to ServiceCEO that needs to be processed, that falls into the Unprocessed tab. The Unprocessed tab will contain any new transactions that have yet to be processed through ServiceCEO, as well as any transactions that failed to process. We can see here this first transaction, number 82, was not reconciled. You can click your payment number here and scroll down to see the transaction log, which will give you a history as well as the information on why this card payment did not go through. Back on the Unprocessed tab, we'll go through the process of processing. To process payments through a service provider in ServiceCEO, we simply select the transactions that we'd like to process and use our Common Actions button to click Process Transactions. This will bring us a pop-up informing us that once you've staged your transactions to process, they may still be visible in the unprocessed queue until it has been processed with the payment service provider. There's no need to process these again. However, there's no error if you do process these again. The system will not cause duplicate transactions by processing the same payment twice. Additionally, processing transactions through ServiceCEO causes the user that initiated the processing to receive an email of a transaction log report containing all transactions that were processed in that batch, whether they were successful or failed. Here we'll refresh our Unprocessed tab to see which payments have gone through and been processed. We can see here that this first payment still errored out. However, the other two payments are no longer in the unprocessed queue, which means that they've been processed by the payment service provider. We can come to the transaction log, and here we're able to see those last three transactions on the log. This concludes the training video on adding and processing credit card and checking and savings accounts payments through ServiceCEO and our payment service providers. Please be sure to watch the next video on how your customers can add payments themselves through the customer portal.